Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Whitmire, inactive CPA. Welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets, the podcast where I interview finance executives, entrepreneurs, investors, like honestly, whoever I want and find interesting. And the goal is to provide advice and some entertainment along the way. And so really excited for today's guest, highly sought after, and we're excited to be able to get her on the podcast. So Amy Vetter, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Amy Vetter. I'm a CPA. I would say not a practicing CPA, but have been a practicing CPA, work in the accounting profession though, as a consultant and advisor. And I've been heavily in the accounting software space and do a lot with the AICPA and state societies. And then also have a business where I have a yoga studio. So that's my other side.
Awesome. So we're going to learn about a mix of accounting and mindfulness along the way.
Exactly. Yes.
Did you happen to catch our mental health awareness
I
month
did. Yeah. I'm going to
content?
be a part of it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I was really excited. The team did a great job with everything. So thank you for your
I'm
help.
excited.
So yeah, you know your career path. You kind of started, I think, the way a lot of our audience starts, but then you've had a really interesting journey along the way. So do you mind taking us from the top? Like, how'd you get into
Sure.
this? How long did you make it an audit, and what happened after that?
Yeah. So my grandfather was a CPA. He was a CPA in the 1930s.
Okay.
So I had heard about being a CPA from the time I was little. I was saying I was going to be a CPA when I was 12 years old. So I knew what a CPA was, but I was being, definitely guided in that direction.
And
So
did your parents head in that direction as well?
no. So my mom, who her father was the CPA, was an art teacher. So she didn't go in that direction. So she definitely pushed me to go back into that field because she thought it was a safer career.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I played music. I was in art, the whole time, but still went down the path of being a CPA, going through college. And I was fortunate enough to have a co-op program during college where I went to University of Cincinnati, where you work 1 quarter and then you go to school 1 quarter. So I learned what I didn't want to do early on.
Can you tell us about that?
I had my first co-op at a corporation. It was Chiquita, in their tax department, and they hired, I don't know, there were 6 co-ops during tax season, and we were doing tax returns for like banana huts and all these different countries.
Oh my gosh, no wonder.
I literally had accounting 101 at that point. So I was in shock. But learned from that job. Like I wasn't someone that could just sit all day. So that wasn't a job that was gonna work for me going forward. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah,
But
because you're just doing basically a tax
pushing it
checklist
out
and
through
going
computers.
pushing
Yeah.
doing that, and it's not. And yeah, when you're in a bit in over your head with accounting 101 under your belt, that's
Yeah.
the only thing.
And literally, had 3 returns going at a time where I was processing one on things used to take so long, processing one on a computer, printing one out, collating another one just to keep myself busy.
There's a cool term for that now that I recently heard. It's time stacking.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's been branded.
Well, actually, it was stupid because then I got done too soon and I got assigned a state tax audit.
The challenges of being good at what you do.
It's being like too efficient. Yeah. So, anyways, and then, back then it just felt like there was only 2 paths to go, tax or audit. And I think for a lot of, young accounting professionals, that's what you think. I don't, even today. So I went the audit route after having that co-op and worked for KPMG. And I was also told at the time, which is kind of, it's like students talking to students, like, what do we know? Like, we haven't done any of this, but, you don't want to be an internal audit. You want to do external audit. You want to go into public accounting. So then I didn't take any job interviews that were internal audit, and I did all external. And so I worked for KPMG And then we were moving to South Florida, and I had an opportunity as an internal auditor at Ryder. And of course, in my head, I was like, well, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And the recruiter was like, this is an executive rotation program. You should really, look into it. I ended up loving internal audit. Um, because it was more operational. You were more involved in the business. You really got
Yeah.
to know the business. I mean, as nerdy as it sounds, I mean, I was going into warehouses and, dealing with, it was in the logistics side of Ryder. And I just loved it. I loved seeing how you can make it more efficient and
Yeah.
so forth. So, and I was able to travel internationally doing it. So it was a great job. But then I had my first child, and he was a preemie. So that kind of changed my trajectory. Like I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
But then it was like I couldn't do the commute there, and the job, the hours were so long that I decided to open my first practice. And when I opened, I didn't want to do audit because I thought there was too much liability for me being by myself. I didn't
That's
know.
smart. Hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I decided to do bookkeeping services, and I was just going to hire a bunch of bookkeepers. And at the time, I looked at other accountants' advertisements to see how they were advertising. And I saw the QuickBooks Pro Advisor logo when it was like really, really new. So I was like,
Okay.
oh, I'll get that.
Yeah.
And so I got that. And it took me in a whole nother direction because the clients started calling, and they didn't want, I mean, some of them wanted bookkeeping, but most of them wanted help. Like they wanted to do the accounting, but they didn't know what the numbers were going to tell them. They didn't know what it meant, and I
Oh,
think
okay.
like your product, um it's so similar. It's like you can put all that information forward, but unless there's a human, an expert,
Right.
in that, you don't know what it means, how to actually take actions on the numbers. And so that, today is called client advisory services. At the time, many accountants look down on me. They're like, you're not doing tax, you're not doing audit. I'm like, no, give me your
It's
give
so
me the work you
silly.
don't want, and I'll give you the tax work. So
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, it almost sounds like you're, in some regards, a part-time CFO. Like you're helping
oh
interpret
yeah.
interpret the numbers and come up with strategy. It's
Yeah,
interesting to
it
look
was
down
being an
on.
outsourced controller, is what I called it at the time. Now it's outsourced CFO. Um, but it really got me into the operations of businesses and pulled more of my creative side out of, and I think that's what's so great about being a controller and a CFO, because you get to be a part of the business and really, figure it out. But I do think having the audit background is what helped me,
Yeah, I
because you learn business process, checklist wise, process wise. And then when you have to apply it, being in a company or outside of a company, it's like you start going back to those audit things,
yeah.
and it really helps you.
Well, I've also noticed the mentality, and I'm curious if you have this as well. Is like when I moved over into corporate, I always knew that everything was going to be audited, and so
Yeah.
I sort of
I mean,
thought
right,
like,
exactly.
how do I organize this so when the auditors come out, it's going to be easy to get through this whole process, and you sort of, yeah, you know what they're going to do, and
Yeah.
you can calculate their
Yeah.
materiality thresholds and all that good
Yeah.
stuff if you have the information.
Exactly.
I, one one of the points I do like to make is how much you can learn about running a business and
Mhm.
operations through the audit world.
Yes.
Um, but I guess it's always been like, hey, you're going to move around different jobs and get an understanding of what it's like. So that
But you
notion
haven't
of,
done it.
yeah, you haven't done it. Then when you move to internal audit, you get a deep dive at a company. And I mean, I
Right.
can't imagine Ryder was the easiest place operationally. Like there seems to be
Oh,
a
so
lot of,
hard.
I can only
Yeah.
imagine how much was going on around Ryder.
Yeah. Well, and it was such a so I went from internal audit to a job in global financial analysis, which I loved,
Oh, awesome.
which was the logistics contracts that they would outsource. So, you'd have to, like a contract would be Toyota of getting all the parts into the plant, and you have to figure out land, sea, or air was most efficient, and work with the logistics engineers. And the warehouse manager. So all that internal audit background was really important because I had been in the warehouses and I knew how they worked. And so knowing, I think it's just a lesson with anyone is that we can't just sit at our desk and look at the numbers. Like, it's really important to get into the operations. It's important to talk to people that are affecting the numbers, because you learn so much more of changes and improvements you can make in a business by stepping off your desk.
Right. And it sounds like that's a good way to position yourself to learn new skills and maybe kind of, yeah,
Yes.
rise out of the entry ranks and start to move into like management or even the
Mhm.
executive level from there.
Well, and plus there's so many specialties in accounting that I don't think, people realize, and you only know that through length of your career,
Yeah.
so I have my practice for many years. I sold my practice and ended up moving into Intuit because I was speaking for them for many years, doing QuickBooks certificate. At the time, it was these 100 city tours when it was QuickBooks
Oh,
Desktop.
wow.
And
I,
so there would be like a few of us out going around the country in a short period of time, like half-day sessions of like, these are the new features of QuickBooks, and you got your free QuickBooks by showing up.
okay.
But I met so many accountants during that time, and I found my love for speaking during that, and seeing how, like, with each accountant that I spoke with, they were affecting all of their clients in a positive way. So
Mhm.
if they figured out one little thing that they could do in that software that would make a difference, you're helping all of their clients as well. And so I really got fascinated with software through that business. And I moved. So I really pivoted my career once I sold my business to being in the accounting software technology industry, and being that subject matter expert that's been there, done it, knows what accountants need, but also can see the benefits of automation and all the cool stuff that's happening. And so I think that's what's exciting about being in the profession today, is that it's not just tax or audit. Like, even within audit, could you be a smart contract auditor, or just on supply chain? And there's just
Yeah.
so many different routes you can go. You can focus on robotics, technology. This CFO service um, is just so different now, where you don't have to spend all this time on spreadsheets, that you can really surface this information quicker, so that you can be that proactive person in a business, not just the cost center, but the service center
Yeah.
of, how do you help people with the numbers rather than give them reports that they don't understand.
I mean, if you can interpret the data and make one suggestion, it could tweak the business materially and totally change the trajectory of for that business owner. It's
Yeah.
super. All right, I want to go back to public speaking. This is
Okay.
something. So
Yeah.
the old Seinfeld joke of like, people, hey, number one fear is public speaking. Number two
Yes.
is death. So everyone in the audience would rather be dead than in your position. How did you have to do training? I know a lot of accountants aren't comfortable speaking publicly, but
Mhm.
I also think it's really an important skill for moving up,
Yes.
like presentation skills and everything. So, did you just have it or did you do training for it? Is it something you practice? Can you tell me more about that transition?
So I do think this is where my music side came out, is
Makes
that,
perfect sense.
when I've thought about it over the years, because I haven't had that fear of speaking, and I know so many people do, is I played violin. And with violin, you have to do recitals all by yourself. And if you play a note wrong on violin, it sounds really, really bad.
Okay.
so, so I learned how to practice, rehearse, um, and being, a part of concerts, and seeing like how an experience is created. That's something that I've always kept with me. And when I think about speaking can be like, I can speak to a room of 2,000 people and get excited, but it can be just as hard to speak to a boardroom, or, in front of a small group in a conference room. And I think the most important thing is rehearse. I mean, you need to know what you're going to say, but you also need to think about the story that you're telling. So when you're presenting financials, it's not like so many times you'll see financial people just listing off a bunch of like, we did this better than last month. We didn't do this better than last month, and it's just dry. So instead, like think about it like a play where there's three acts.
Okay.
The first act is like you're setting the stage. This is the situation. The second act is always like where the trouble happens, where there's a crisis,
Yeah.
where you're putting, where's the problems in the business. And the third act are your solutions and your suggestions, and you're open for conversation. And when you can kind of round out the experience of what you're trying to create, no matter if it's for a big room or a small room, it's important that you understand that when you're speaking, it's not about you.
Mhm.
It's about the audience, and it's about the person at the table of what they're trying to receive from the information you're imparting. And when you take that stress off of yourself that it's about you,
Yeah.
then you deliver, better content for people, I think.
And I sort of on that note, one of the best tips I ever got is that the audience doesn't want you to fail.
Right.
They showed up to learn something. They want to see you do well. It's not like everyone's rooting for you to really
Right.
struggle on stage. So, and if you're the expert in the space and you've rehearsed a little bit, just get up there and deliver, and you know what you're talking about, so it'll come off natural. I'm curious, do you like to read when you speak, or are you more free flowing?
Oh, I'm free flow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same with me. I can't I can't read in front of people. It's really embarrassing. And
No.
your pointer about small rooms being intimidating, I
Hmm.
totally agree with, because when you're in a big audience, you're not going to get interrupted and you're not going to get a question.
Right.
That could happen and throw you off in a smaller meeting. So that's definitely something to be
Well,
very
and
aware
to
of.
that point, you need to plan for that. So how would you address an interruption, or do you set it up front in your talk to say, I'm going to save time for questions at the end, so write down your questions as I go through this. Like
Yeah.
you control the conversation rather than letting the conversation get out of hand, and then you don't get the point across that you want.
I, I'll say one of my biggest learnings has been meeting with VCs.
Hmm.
They love interrupting in the middle, and so it's just, hey, I'd love to table that for a second. I'm going to get to that later in a few slides. If we could just hold off,
Exactly.
that would be best. Your point around the acts is awesome. Act one, two, and three. As you said that, it started to resonate with me that like I think with accountants, we're very in the weeds with what we're doing, and we know it
Yes.
really well. And so we're not good at, and I'm by we, I actually mean me. I'm speaking personally. Uh, Act one was something I skipped for years,
Right.
because you assume everyone knows what you're talking about, but
Right.
act one is so important. It's for context setting. Let me set the stage for you on things like this. So I'm speaking to the audience. That's a great takeaway for public speaking: is don't forget act one, because people need to know what the heck you're talking about before
Yeah.
you can actually move into the
Well,
rest.
and even if you're one on one with, so if you're working with a client or someone in another department, it's important to set the stage for them that you have to remember they aren't financial. They don't know what you know. I always use this example of the elevator conversation where someone's meeting with an accountant. They've got all these complicated numbers and charts, and the accountant keeps, it's a husband and wife, and the accountant keeps asking them, you understand? Do you have any questions? No, don't have any questions, whatever. They get in the elevator and they're like, did you understand what she said? No. Did you
Mm,
understand? Nope. But they
yeah,
feel so intimidated to bring it up because they don't even know what to ask or where, and it's something that's
yeah.
out of their will. If numbers is not something you feel comfortable with and you want to look smart, then you're not going to ask the question. So don't assume that someone's understanding. Like one of the things about communication is you can't assume that communication happened.
Right.
You have
Mhm.
to make sure that someone is feeding back, that they can repeat to you what's going on, that you got your point across, that they weren't in another conversation. And so um, it's just really important as an accountant. We spend a lot of time on technical skills, but not necessarily the time we need on the communication skills that is such a critical piece of the job.
Do you have any advice for like learnings? Are there any good books or blogs or courses around that could help?
Yeah, well, a lot of these courses actually, the it, for those of you that are, in the financial controller space, CGMA is a certification through the AICPA, and they have a whole framework of great training that you can take that is on the AICPA's website. But it's definitely something to look into because it talks about all the different aspects of being a controller, a CFO, these communication skills that you need as well. And so not only is it a good certification to have, but it's a good framework and learning to go through.
That's very cool. And is it
Yeah.
CPE
Oh
certified as
yeah,
well?
yeah,
Oh, so hey, for
yeah,
everyone going to get their, stay
yeah.
up to date.
Everything
That's
with it, but the other thing with it is there's courses you can take. I went to speaker training a couple years ago because I was like, well, I've never really done it, so I want to see if there's anything I'm missing. So speaker training doesn't have to mean you're a keynote speaker. There were lots of people there that were salespeople,
yep.
people that have to present to their boards, and they needed to just get better at their pitches, better at how they structured speaking. So it doesn't always have to be CPE, if it's something that will enhance you as a person. And then I would say the third place, and for me, this is, probably most important, is shadowing people or asking people, can I just tag along on that meeting? I'm not going to talk. I just want to see how it operates. I want to see the questions you get asked, how you respond, where you go do your research, that sort of thing. Watch and find the mentors and the coaches that you want out there that resonate with the way that you're striving to run a conversation or a talk as well, and then learn from them as well. There's real life learning and then there's content learning.
I I prefer the real life learning. That's really great advice. Yeah, try to associate yourself with people you respect and sort of want to be like.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right. So I'd love to keep moving through your career because
Okay.
some very
Yeah.
interesting things happen. So tell
Yeah.
me about what was next.
So my really big pivot was I was a partner in a CPA firm. So a CPA firm had acquired my accounting services practice. So I became a partner there. And I just uh wasn't as happy as I thought that I was going to be with becoming a partner, and went through a lot of transformation. And at the time I started yoga, which was not something that I ever thought I would do. I'm type A.
Yeah.
I tried to go to yoga, many times, and I was like, I don't get it. I had my second son and got sick from the pregnancy. It was the only thing the doctor would allow me to do.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, okay, I'll do yoga. And because I had to slow down and really pay attention, one of the things that yoga has taught me over time, not, I knew I was starting to feel stuff, but a lot of times you're pushing through to a goal in your career. It's where you want to go, but you're not necessarily like looking side to side of, is this really what I want, or is this just what I thought I wanted, and so forth. And it really made me step back and observe how I was feeling. Where did I feel off in
Hmm.
my life? And when I say that, a lot of times all of us hit these like moments of kind of like, what's going on? I don't feel great. But and those moments, it's better to sit in the uncomfortable than to quit everything, because that can be our first reaction, is to
Yeah.
quit and just move on. But really observing what's working for us, what's not working for us. Is it the outside world? Is it something internally I need to work on? Using coaches, using therapists, using whatever you need to do from a mindfulness perspective to help guide you, to have that independent perspective. And through yoga, I started noticing how off balance I was as far as my work life, and really trying to get that in better order. Because I go to a yoga class, and normally I'd be working at night, and I'd be like, well, I don't want to go back to work right now. I feel good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so how do I restructure that? And, went to an executive coach in my late 30s and really said, like, I need to see, like, how do I take the experience that I have that I love, and I do love working, having an impact on this profession and on clients, but which direction does it go? And so a lot of those conversations were very helpful. I started really tapping into, technology, went through working at Intuit. I worked at Intact, now Sage Intact, running their accountant channel. And I also worked for Xero as a global vice president of
Awesome.
sales and or it was education and professional services. And through those roles and speaking for all those companies, by the end of it, I was like, what I love to do is speak. And
Yeah.
so without the experience of doing that, I, really couldn't be the speaker I am today, or be able to help, the accountants that come for guidance, like I do now, because I've been in their shoes. And so it really does take that path. And for me, it's being very open to opportunities as they come, versus like, I know a lot of people, opportunities come and they're like, oh, I might not be ready, or I couldn't do it for this reason or that reason. And it's like pushing past that fear of like, well, let's just see, I mean, when I took on the job at Xero, I'd never run a global organization. And,
Mhm.
and then I was like, learning from everybody too, like not trying to come in as the expert, like learning what they knew, and then bringing in my ideas based on their expertise as well. And I learned so much from the experience. But you could have stepped back and said, oh, I mean, I don't have the experience to run a global organization. And that, you have to be open to the guests,
Yeah.
and then take on the new thing and see where it takes you.
It feels like, yeah, there are always reservations about any decision. You can always, yeah, convince yourself to saying no.
Yes.
One of my thoughts is like, we can always go back and get a job in accounting. It's
Exactly.
it's worth the risk. Like if there's
That's why
something,
to go into it from the beginning,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was for job security, so that plays out for your next role. And if there's something you want to try, I view it as a low risk, high reward
Yeah.
proposition, which like I'll take those all day long. That sounds
Yeah.
great to me. And
Exactly.
so yeah, it sounds like you got to the same the same
Yeah.
conclusion there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you love public speaking, you love yoga.
Yeah.
What do you decide to do next?
Well, and I think it's all kind of, and again, like that's what's being aware and open to the journey is, I would have never thought. And when I started doing yoga, I didn't tell anyone I did yoga. Like I thought the CPAs would look down on me. And so
You
so
might you might be right.
and I remember like teaching a class, and one of my clients came in, and the class didn't know I was a CPA, right? Like they just knew me as the yoga teacher.
Yeah.
And the client comes in and was like, oh, you're the teacher, and starts talking to me about stuff. And then someone else here, they're like, wait, you're a CPA? And I'm like, yeah. And then they're telling me about their husband who's a CPA, and this person that's a CPA,
And they're
and
asking you
then all
tax
this,
questions.
yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, I merged the two worlds together and saw like both people liked knowing that other side of me. Like there were other conversations, and then I was able to get to know them better as well. And so I would never have in a million years, like when I started accounting, required to wear the navy suit and the skirt to my knees and, whatever, to be
Yeah.
able at this point, um, I did a whole mindfulness series for the AICPA, like who would have ever thought?
That's
And that's the thing is like, you just have to watch the journey and then be open to what you can bring in that are your passions to what you do. And so I've never left the accounting profession and all this time, but I've been able to get involved with software and do different strategies for firms and accountants and for go to market for technology companies, and speak and use my yoga to help people with work-life balance. And who would have thought?
yeah.
So it's like then when you can merge it all together, it's kind of exciting, but it takes time, to
Like,
get there.
I think that's very cool advice. Like a lot of us are very much in the here's how you progress up in your career, and it's sort of you have the path set out, but really follow your passion and enjoy the journey and figure out what you like. And if you can leverage your accounting experience, that's great. Which
Yeah.
you figured that out. So with the with the yoga studio, do you have one studio, or are
Mhm.
you're planning to like expand that, or is it more of a
No, not
do
in
you like
these
to go
times.
teach
Yeah.
classes? Oh well, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, right now,
Yeah.
COVID is not a great time to be expanding
Yeah.
yoga studios. So
But we are virtual, so we have every class being virtually, streamed as
yeah.
well. But we run about 35 or more classes a week, and I have about 15 different teachers,
Oh, very cool.
that teach there. So, but COVID's definitely been hard on small business owners in certain fields. So this one is one of them.
For
But
sure.
it's kind of interesting because the yoga studio originally wasn't supposed to be a physical space; it was supposed to be a virtual studio, and now because of COVID, we're a virtual studio. So it's weird how
I,
that's the other thing. Like when I say be open, like even being a business owner or whatever you're in your career, like you can think you know what your job is or what your business is, but then you get informed by other things that people have other needs, and you have to be open to listen to what people need, and it starts shifting what you're doing.
right, right. So you're like on the cutting edge of virtual yoga
I was
courses. Was
when I
that
first started. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
was the original idea. Okay, that's
Yeah.
very are
It's
you planning
funny.
on going back to a physical space when,
Well,
things vaccines more
we
rolled out?
have people coming in, but we're limited in capacity because of the, state guidelines still. So,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Well, man, this is a very cool story. It's so like
Well, thank
merging the
you.
accounting with public speaking and software
Yeah.
and
And
yoga and
yoga.
everything. I have
Yeah.
not heard a story like that. So yeah, you get to optimize your degree, do what you love, and that's
Well,
awesome.
and that's what I try to tell young accountants is to not give up on the profession. Like when you first start in accounting, as you know, it's just not fun. I
Yeah,
didn't think so.
especially the
you
audit
know,
route. It's tough.
yeah.
It's tough. You
Yeah.
do
I
learn a
mean,
lot.
yeah, you learn a lot, and there's no way to know where you want to go without that base knowledge. So there are so many pathways now with technology and all the different types of services clients need, and secure, cybersecurity, all this different stuff that you can get into. It's exploring it and seeing what's out there, and then how you kind of specialize in different areas.
And one of the cool developments in our field is with more software coming along,
Yeah.
there's actually different opportunities, and we're seeing accountants move into operations roles
Oh
because
yeah.
of everything we've just talked about. So this like business operations is a new function that's being staffed by a lot of accountants who don't want to do the mundane work, and that can get automated, and they can
Yeah.
move over to like help the business get better. So yeah, it's exploring.
Yeah.
Would you still would you still recommend going to audit straight out of college, or
Yes.
do you think people should? Okay, you still recommend going to audit,
I
going to
I do think, I can't say I enjoyed my time as an external auditor, but the thing that was so important for my career was like seeing all those different businesses, learning different businesses that I would have never walked into. Like one of them was, a financial services business where I was like interviewing actuaries. Like, when would I ever be talking to an actuary?
yeah, it's a good
And
point.
not that they talk a lot, but I mean, like, it it's just you learn so many things, even doing a physical inventory, when you're in the warehouse, you're seeing how things operate, how they hide things, how they steal things, all of those things.
Yeah,
Um, it ends up helping you in business later. Like I feel like my audit background has been key foundation for everything I've done.
yeah, it's a great point. You get broad exposure, and it will help you. And yeah, just ways you can't even realize today. In 10 years, you'll benefit from it, and you won't realize that what you did yesterday is going to be helpful.
Well, even, thinking back on, I mean, they throw you as like, just graduating from accounting to sit across from a controller and ask them if they committed fraud last year. But
It,
like,
it's
but
like
like, but you literally have to, as a young accountant, sit with a senior executive and have a conversation, and even if you're going through a checklist, have the confidence to have that meeting is really hard. I mean, it really pushes you out of your comfort zone. And I can't think of a lot of accounting jobs that do that so early.
I will never forget my first fraud inquiry. It's terrifying. Yeah, you're 22 years old meeting with some like seasoned executive.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. But I will say, as you move up in the world, everyone's just a human being, and it's fair, and
exactly.
they understand the pain points, and there's no reason to not have confidence in a conversation because guess what? They realize it's a joke also.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
they get through it. So um, well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I appreciate you taking
Thanks
the
for
time to
having
hop
me
on the
on.
podcast. And any any parting words of advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think just to enjoy the journey, I mean, enjoy learning, like not the outcome. Enjoy, the process of learning of what, tools like yours, the data that comes out of it and how you can dig deeper into finding answers and just that process of expanding yourself and not just, doing what you've always done because you've always done it.
Well, that's awesome advice. And for the audience, if you are interested in virtual yoga and want to work with a CPA, where can they find your yoga studio?
It is Drishtiq. So it's DRISHTIQ
Okay,
yoga.com.
awesome.
Or you can come to my website, amyvetter.com, and find me there and be able to push through too. So,
Recommend, yeah, all
yeah.
kinds of good resources.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Amy, so much for joining today. Really appreciate your time and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.